Blink. 1, 2, a 1 and 2, a 3, a 4, do 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 do. What a beep bop boop boop boo. Do 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 do. It's yeah. Hey there, hot enough for you, Pinks and Louie. I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but I frankly just like talking about it because this is the first like nice neighborhood I've ever lived in as an adult. Where the shop is in beautiful Van Nuys, California, corner of Louise and Saticoy in the Lake Balboa neighborhood. It was 106 today, which is rude, frankly, inconsiderate to be sure. But that's in the valley, baby. Over here on the west side, the professional singles neighborhood of Sawtell. I don't know how I got in here. It's a balmy 90 degrees. It's honestly, it's a huge difference. I will take 90 degrees over 106 any day. I had to hose myself down before I even did this when I walked in the door. It's not even spring yet. Okay. Very slow week this week is, which I'm frankly a little grateful for. This is the 5th Wednesday of the month, known in the industry as the 5th week, and it's traditionally a slow week. You know what I mean? Like the Big Two and all the other companies following. Although I can't imagine that Image really gives a shit, but yeah, the Big Two always, you know, every Wednesday they've got 10 to 15 books out, if not 20. And if it's Marvel, I buy most of them. But every now and again on the 5th week, you get kind of a break because it's like they put out Amazing Fantasy number 1000, which specious numbering at best to begin with, but also just kind of another anniversary special that I, at this point in time, do not feel that I need. Especially because I pay for the Marvel Unlimited app and I rarely use it these days. That's where I'm supposed to be reading all this sort of stuff that I would love to, I want to read every comic that Marvel's ever published, but I don't have the room to store all of them, nor the outlay. So it's just nice. What is a kind of a drag, and this is going to be somewhat ironic given what I just said, I don't think they did any 5th week books this month. What Marvel and DC would often do in the heyday of the early 21st century especially, I think this goes back to like the late 90s, early 2000s though. They put out a 5-issue miniseries, one a week. And it's usually, you know, what do you call, like that Darkhold series they did not too long ago. Although that was monthly, now that I'm thinking about it. Was it? No, I don't think it was. That Darkhold series where they did an alpha issue and then they did 4 one-shots. It was like Darkhold Wasp, Darkhold Spider-Man, Darkhold The Vanisher, and Darkhold Aunt Petunia. But or something like that. And then the Omega. Oh, so that's 6 issues. That's not even the This is what I'm saying. Is now I'm trying to think of, well, there was a Young Avengers one where it was like Young Avengers featuring Patriot, Young Avengers featuring Stature, and some of the other Young Avengers. What other 5th week books? Marvel has done a couple times. They'll do a series of new What Ifs that are all number 1s, but like what if the newer Fantastic Four stayed together, or what if, and sometimes they're just titled What If Secret Wars, what if, you know, Kraven's Big Hunt, I think is the one maybe. If not, it should be. And we'll get to Kraven in a moment here. But I don't think they did one for this month, which isn't, like I say, I mean, the nice thing is that I'm not getting quite so many funny books, because, I mean, I just need a breather sometimes, you know, as much as I love them. And here I am complaining that there wasn't another series for me to buy, but I feel like it's this, there's like, again, in the industry, the death knell of single issue comics is tolling across the land once again, and you know, you got a lot of Chicken Littles out there, but that's the thing, is that they're not wrong either. Like, I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but with the way that comic books are distributed these days, it's becoming increasingly less profitable for retail comic book stores to carry certain products. DC Comics. DC Comics. I don't know why I cleared my throat while I was saying it. So, you know, it's this tremor is being felt right now that if stores stop carrying DC will likely just stop publishing them. Which, I don't know, every time somebody says that, even if it's me, I go, are they though? Are they really going to stop publishing comics? I mean, it's hard to believe. It was hard to believe when they canceled Mad Magazine, though, and they still did it. I mean, that should have been canceled years ago, but it was still, you know, present for my entire life, obviously much longer before that, 27 years or so. Why did I bring that up again? I don't know. Who gives a shit? All right. This week. Oh, that's right. It was on my 5th week books. That's what it... The fact that neither Marvel nor DC, to my recollection, I might check the previews for these last few weeks, did a 5th week book, to me feels like, oh, it's another sign that they're, like, scaling down because this isn't going to be a thing anymore. And then I'll have to find something else to talk about every Wednesday. What will I do? This week, I bought X-Force number 31. This is a tie-in to the Judgment Day, AXE Judgment Day event, which I'll get into later. But I'm shuffling this to the top of the to-read pile because it's a really good story. In the previous issue, Kraven, who's generally a Spider-Man villain, was prominently featured, and now that the Eternals have declared that mutants are now unkillable, or I guess the mutants have declared that, Kraven is the hunter. That's his whole thing, is that he has to kill things. That's how he became a Spider-Man villain, because he saw Spider-Man in the press and was like, well, I'll show that dirty American. I always forget that Kraven started out, even though his name is Kravinoff, Sergei Kravinoff. I often forget that, like, a lot of Marvel Silver Age villains started out as a Soviet agent of some sort. I think the Chameleon was definitely a Soviet agent, and I think they are brothers, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember the Chameleon's birth name now, though. But anyway, Kraven's whole thing is that he hunts, and so there's this whole B-plot in the last X-Force with him hunting this polar bear, and it was super good. Oh, and he finds Deadpool's head. That's how it tied back in. That's the other thing, is that Deadpool has been appearing in this more, and I was just thinking about that. They announced a new Deadpool monthly, which he hasn't had one for a year or two now, I want to say. I never used to like Deadpool when he was first created. I'm going to go on to a Deadpool sidebar. When Deadpool was first created by Rob Liefeld and Fabian Nicieza, I didn't really care for the character. And it wasn't that he was like this funny, sarcastic character, is that it wasn't funny. Like, Deadpool was supposed to be funny, but he was never, to my mind, written funny until Daniel Way started writing him. Daniel Way is one of my favorite comic book writers, creator of Hit Monkey, if you watch that kind of smaller scale MCU entry. It's a TV series on Hulu. I believe it's animated. I haven't seen it yet. I know Daniel Way did not get paid for it, so I'm not in a hurry to watch it either. Anyway, Daniel Way was a great writer. He wrote a lot for Marvel. He wrote some indie stuff too, and I want to even say I don't think he ever wrote for DC at all. Maybe Vertigo, but I doubt it. But he wrote, when I first discovered him, he had written a miniseries called Bullseye's Greatest Hits, and I loved the Bullseye character, so I was already like, oh, I'm listening. And then it was drawn by Steve Dillon, who drew Preacher, and what else and The Punisher with Garth Ennis. There were different artists on The Punisher with Garth Ennis, but Dillon, I think, was the most of them. So I bought that series because of that, but I was immediately blown away by the script, and Daniel Way is a tremendous writer. And then he went on. After that, he went to Deadpool. Like, I guess that series did well enough they gave him a monthly, and I was all of a sudden, I'm going to buy Deadpool now. I think that was around Secret Invasion, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, I think they launched that Deadpool title. The first issue was a Secret Invasion tie-in. But then it went on to be a regular monthly, and it was great. I didn't really know, like at the time, it had already been well established that Deadpool would break the fourth wall, which I don't remember that from when I was a kid. So in the Daniel Way series, he not only was breaking the fourth wall, but there were two different narrators. There were captions on the page, but they were also in Deadpool's head, and they would argue with each other. It was really fun, and I think that's Way. I think I finally read. I haven't read Cable and Deadpool all the way through yet, but I've read all the '90s Deadpool series, all the Joe Kelly stuff, and and then after Daniel Way left, he wrote it for a very long time. Then it was Jerry Duggan and Brian Posehn, and then just Jerry Duggan for a while. And then after that run, I think I stopped. I think I stopped for a little bit during that run, and then I came back to it. I don't remember who was writing that one. Was it? No, I can't pull it. The last series was written by Scotty Young, and that was the series where I was like, nothing against Scotty Young or against the character of Deadpool. I was like, I need a break from this book for a while. But now he's coming back, and he's coming back kind of through X-Force, and they're going to give him his own title. So anyway, that's why I went on a lot of unnecessary, bird walking there. But also this week is the new Thunderbolts #1. This is Thunderbolts, and I'm sure I've mentioned this. Thunderbolts is still one of my favorite comic books of all time. I didn't get into it until much, much, much later. It started in the late '90s, and the central conceit was this was right after Marvel did their Onslaught storyline, which killed off a lot of the main characters: the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, the Avengers, most of the Avengers anyway. And then they were all rebooted for about a year, and then they went, never mind, we're going back. Because it was a disaster. It was a piece of shit story. I read it not that long ago, and it continues to not hold up. But one of the good things to come out of all that, Michigas, is that there was, oh man, write that down. It was the first time I used a Yiddish word properly that wasn't schmuck. Right. So that was during Heroes Reborn. During Heroes Reborn, they rebooted all the major titles, Fantastic Four and Avengers, etc. And like Jim Lee came back to draw Captain America, or was that no? Liefeld came back to draw Captain America. Jim Lee, I think, drew Fantastic Four, maybe. Again, I'm currently like going through those, and they're stinky. They're not good. But that was like in a different reality, right? In the main Marvel continuity universe, 616 universe, all of a sudden the Earth is without its superheroes, and then along come the Thunderbolts, who are this new team that nobody had ever heard of, with all these superheroes no one had ever heard of, led by a fellow named Citizen V. And then the big reveal at the end of issue 1 is that all of the Thunderbolts are in fact supervillains, led by Baron Zemo, who's going by Citizen V. And they were, this is, now we're ripe to take over the world this way. But it didn't. A lot of the Thunderbolts, that was the fun part of it, was that some of them were like, but I want a second chance. I like being a hero, as it turns out. And then, Zemo's got his own thing going on, and there's a lot of sniping and infighting and backbiting, and that's long been like a staple of this title, and I love it. It gets really stupid in the early 2000s. Like they made, I think the Beetle became Mach 3. They changed his code name, which I guess is cooler than the Beetle, but he became a black fellow for a while, which was ridiculous. And it wasn't the first time that had happened in superhero comics, in Marvel anyway, where a white character somehow he went through some machine or something, and it came out a black guy. It's so stupid. Definitely written by white guys. I don't remember who. It might have been Nicieza, speaking of which, who wrote that story. I don't remember now. Like I say, I didn't get into the Thunderbolts until much later. In the early 100s of that issue, of that series, it started to tie into the Civil War, and I was reading a lot of the Civil War stuff, so I read those. and they were good. And then Warren Ellis wrote Thunderbolts after that, and I was a huge fan of his back then. So that's when I started buying it monthly, and I got really into it. And then so eventually I went back. I've told this story a couple times, but like in 2015, I went through a real bad bout of depression. And the only good thing to come out of it was I read so much stuff, and I wouldn't go out. I would just go to work and then read comics. And I read so much stuff. I spent way too much money on comics, but that was the year I finished out my Thunderbolts run. I read the whole series. I read all the Jim Starlin cosmic stuff from the 70s. I read all of Sandman. I read all of Lucifer. I read all of... Oh, there was something else that I just had. Spider-Man 2099. I finally finished that. Even though I didn't read the whole thing, I just read the stuff that I had... The stuff that I had not had for years and years. Because I found a really rare issue for really cheap. The guy didn't know what he had. But that was... This is not a fond memory necessarily, but... Yeah, I love the Thunderbolts. And this series is written by Jim Zub, who wrote the previous Thunderbolts series a few years ago. And I didn't like it, to be honest with you. There's a lot of his work that I haven't liked, but he wrote a short story in a recent issue of Moon Knight, Black, White, and Blood that I was really impressed by. So on the strength of that one short story, I'm like, okay, I'm excited for this. There's a couple new characters that are being introduced. Hawkeye is back as leader. He was leader of the Thunderbolts after Citizen V. And it's coming out of the Devil's Reign event, which is fine. I just feel like it'll be, I don't know. It's not like none of these characters are former villains, except for Hawkeye. But it's Spectrum is her name now. She used to be Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau, America Chavez. You know, you may recognize both these from the cinema. This is the current Power Man, and this is one of Purple Man's kids. So she actually might be the one like villain. When the Thunderbolts were in, during Devil's Reign was when the Kingpin, who was mayor of New York, declared martial law against all super-powered folk, and a bunch of them, he restarted the Thunderbolts program specifically for New York, and they were all just reformed villains led by John Walker, who had led the Thunderbolts once upon a time also. And in that event, like, U.S. agent John Walker had to be like he was kind of working as like a double agent. Like everyone believed that he would go along with something like that from the King, but he's always been like a hard-edged right-winger. But he was actually like, no, I'm trying to stop this from happening. And so that's where this is spinning out of. But none of those characters that I mentioned are apparently in this comic. Doesn't mean it's not going to be a pick of the week, but picks of last week, Alright, I've definitely been all over the place. I do hope the sound quality is better. I decided not to plug in my rig. Because frankly, my mom got me that because I was doing a lot of online comedy. So she got it for me at Christmas of 2020. It was great, and I used it. And then 5 months later, I was vaccinated. And I was like, I'm never going to do online comedy again. Some could argue I never did it in the first place, but that's really mean. So Damage Control number 1. This was fine. I feel like that was about what I was expecting, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm excited to have these characters in the Marvel Universe again. It's pretty funny, but, I mean, I watched the pilot of the Goldbergs and I went, I get the idea, thanks. So, it's good. I'm glad there's another Damage Control. I'm gonna leave it there. Judgment Day number 3. This continues to be a really fun event. So in this issue, now the progenitor, who is like the first Celestial, who is decreed that Earth is now under judgment and has 24 hours to prove it is worthy or it will be destroyed. And so of course all the superheroes are like, well, let's beat it up. And then oddly that doesn't work. So now shit's really starting to hit the fan, and I'm really glad. I feel like the event fatigue I was feeling at the beginning of this series has all but gone. Now I'm like invested in the story, and I want to know what's going to be happening next. So, is the light okay? I want to make sure I'm looking good. And then in Minor Threats #1, this was really fun. Patton Oswalt and Jordan Bloom, I enjoy when they have worked together in the past, and I have no reason to feel differently now. It's the premise of it is not something completely unfamiliar, but I'm into it. Like I'm obviously a very big fan of superhero comics, and so most of the time those are done by Marvel and DC. But now what we're getting more these days, like when I was a kid, there were a lot of indie publishers that also published superhero comics. That's largely unheard of now. Even when you have something like from Image has the Frontiersman superhero comic, is also like those guys were like, we hate superheroes, and I think I already went to that. What you get now, though, is more of this kind of postmodern take on superheroes, more realistic things, thanks Watchmen and everything, and that's what we have here. It's very Astro City-ish. Our main character used to be a supervillain sidekick when she was a girl, and now she's just trying to go straight as an adult, but in this... I don't remember the name of the city, but it's clearly an analog for Batman because his arch nemesis kills his sidekick, and now the supervillain, now the superhero, and it's like it's acknowledged in this world that superheroes and supervillains are kind of just playing a game, but now that essentially Robin has been killed, the superheroes are like cracking down. They're like so now it's up to our hero to sort of navigate the world with her friends, a lot of, and that's another thing, because it's small-time crooks. Supervillains as small-time crooks is always a good look. I like stories about two-bit hoods, about, like, it's always been my favorite crime fiction, is about your Henry Hills, basically. Your guys who were just kind of always around, who weren't captains or anything, like they weren't leaders, and that's what we have here. There was a title by Nick Spencer called The Superior Foes of Spider-Man, where Boomerang kept trying to get the Sinister Six going, and he could never get more than 4 guys total. That sort of thing, and it was really funny. And most of the MODOK series they've done over the last 20 years have been in that vein also, where he's just like he used to be a fearsome villain, although obviously he was really silly. But, the more recent comics are like, yeah, he's a giant head with arms that come out of his temples. So yeah, it's good, and I'm looking forward to the rest of it. And now I need to put some pants on so I can go get some dinner. I don't hold the sign up at the end anymore. That's the old days.